They'll never say it out loud, but deep down, when the dust settles and the silence grows louder than your absence ever did, they feel it. That hollow echo of what used to be you. You see, some people don't realize what they had until it stops answering their calls, stops explaining, stops trying, stops fighting to stay. And when you finally let go, that's when the weight of their choices creeps in. But pride will keep their lips sealed, while guilt keeps their heart restless. You were the light they thought would always stay on, the safe place they took for granted, the soul that showed up even when they didn't deserve you. And they hurt you, not because you were weak, but because they thought your strength meant you'd never leave. But oh, you did. And now, behind their smiles and distractions, behind the new relationships, the laughter, the unfined posts, is a quiet truth they're too afraid to say out loud. Here's what they secretly feel after hurting you, but will never admit. There's a certain kind of shame that doesn't make noise. It doesn't scream. It doesn't cry out. It sits quietly, buried beneath distractions and forced laughter. That's the kind of shame they feel every time your name is spoken, every time it finds its way into a room, into a conversation, or into a memory they tried to lock away. See, they thought they could walk away from what you shared and never look back. They thought hurting you would be easy to forget, but pain like that echoes. Love like that haunts. And now, when someone casually mentions you, or when your photo flashes across the screen, that shame creeps in like a whisper they can't silence. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't care how far they've run, because it knows the truth. They broke something beautiful. And beauty, once shattered by careless hands, doesn't let go without leaving traces. They wear the shame like a shadow. It follows them, even in their brightest moments. They can be surrounded by people who don't know your story, yet your name has the power to silence their smile in a second. That's what guilt does. It doesn't wait for a breakdown. It thrives in stillness. You see, when you were in their life, they saw you as dependable, someone who loved them without conditions, someone who forgave, understood, and gave chance after chance. But they didn't treat that love with care. They mishandled what should have been protected. And now, when your name is said, it's not just a memory, it's a mirror, a reflection of who they were when they had you and what they chose to be instead. The shame isn't just about hurting you, it's about what they lost in the process. They know they were reckless with something rare. They know your presence wasn't ordinary. You weren't just someone who showed up. You were someone who stayed, who listened when no one else did, who gave when they had nothing left to offer. And instead of honoring that, they wounded it. Now they carry the silent regret of knowing they can't go back and unhurt you. That's a heavy thing to carry, the knowing, the awareness that you had something whole, something honest, and you destroyed it with your own hands. They pretend to move on. They laugh with friends. They post as if nothing ever cracked inside them, but your name still lingers like unfinished business in their soul. It's not about the words they've heard your name before. It's about the weight that name now carries, because it's tied to everything they didn't say when they should have, everything they did when they should have done better, every opportunity they had to make it right and didn't. And now your name isn't just your name anymore. It's a symbol of who they failed to be when it mattered most. You might think they forgot, that they've rewritten the story in their favor, but the heart remembers what the ego tries to erase. And no matter how many times they say they're fine, they know deep down that they let go of someone who saw them clearer than they saw themselves. That's what makes the shame burn quietly, not because they lost someone, but because they lost someone who believed in them, someone who saw their brokenness and still stayed close. And now that kind of loyalty is gone, replaced by an emptiness they can't seem to fill no matter how hard they try. They hear your name and feel the weight of your silence. It's not just the absence of your voice, it's the absence of your care. That deep, unspoken warmth you used to carry for them. The way you used to look at them with patience. That's not something you can fake. That's not something you can replace. And now, when they're reminded of you, they remember that look, that feeling, that safety. And it hurts, not because you're gone, but because they pushed away the very thing they now wish they could reach for. Sometimes they try to justify it, tell themselves it wasn't that serious, that you were too much, too emotional, too sensitive. But no matter how many lies they tell themselves, your name still punches through the noise. Because deep down, they know better. They know the problem wasn't that you were too much, it's that they were too little, too careless, too blind to recognize the rare soul in front of them. And now they wear that realization like a bruise they can't show anyone. A wound that never bleeds, but never stops aching. You were the calm in their chaos, the voice that brought peace when their world was falling apart. And instead of holding on to you, they chose ego, chose pride, chose convenience. But choices have consequences. And the consequence of hurting someone genuine is carrying the shame of their absence for a lifetime. So they avoid your name. They dodge conversations that might circle back to you, because each mention is a reminder of the heart they mishandled and the forgiveness they'll never get to ask for. They hear your name in songs, in places you once went together, in scents and seasons and dreams they can't shake. It's like the universe keeps whispering your name just to remind them of what they let go. And every time it happens, there's that pause, that brief second where their mind travels back to you, to the way you laughed, the way you made them feel like they were worth something even when they didn't believe it themselves. That memory isn't just a flash, it's a weight, a heavy truth that doesn't go away, no matter how far they run and what hurts them most. What they'll never say is that they can't fix it. That even if they wanted to apologize, even if they finally found the courage to face what they did, you're not the same. You've grown, you've healed, you've outloved the pain, and while they're still haunted by what they lost, you've become someone they can't reach. That distance, that elevation, it's what humbles them in silence. They used to take your love for granted. Now they wish they could even be in the same room as your peace. There are nights when the world goes quiet and their thoughts get loud, when the laughter dies down and they're left alone with themselves. That's when the shame shows up strongest, not with words, but with weight, with the sting of knowing they hurt someone who only ever wanted to see them win, someone who had their back when no one else did. And in those moments, they'd give anything just to go back and hold you a little longer. Say thank you a little louder. Be better instead of bitter. But they won't tell you that. They'll never admit it, because admitting it would mean facing everything they've tried to bury. So they live with it, quietly, silently, hoping time will numb the guilt, but knowing deep down it won't. Because every time your name comes up, that shame rises with it. That ache of a lesson learned too late. And the worst part, they know they'll never find another you. Not in this lifetime, not in the next. And that right there is the price of breaking something beautiful. There are some moments in life that refuse to fade. No matter how far someone tries to distance themselves from the past, certain memories grab hold and never let go. And for them, the one who hurt you, that moment, the moment they lost you, has become a ghost that won't stop showing up. They try to carry on, try to smile, try to act like they've moved on. But their mind is a different battlefield. It replays the moment like a scratched record over and over again. The words they said, the ones they didn't, the way you looked at them one final time with love still in your eyes but disappointment on your face. It's seared into their memory like a brand they can't erase. And while they may never say it out loud, a part of them relives that moment every single day and wishes with everything in them they could go back. They remember the silence that followed, the void you left, the way your absence felt louder than your presence ever did. And it's not just the moment itself, it's everything it represented. That was the end of your patience, the end of your trying, the moment you stopped waiting for them to change. And they know it. They saw the shift. You didn't slam the door. You just stop knocking. And for someone who never believed you'd really walk away, the shock of your absence still rattles their core. They took you for granted, believed your love was permanent, believed no matter what they did, you'd always come back. But you did. And that moment, the one they keep replaying, is when that belief finally shattered. At night, when everything slows down, that memory creeps back in like an old film. The flash of your face, the sound of your voice, the emotion in your final words. Maybe you didn't even say much. Maybe it was just the look in your eyes that told them everything had changed, that they had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And in that moment, they knew. But instead of apologizing, instead of grabbing your hand and saying, "Don't go," they stayed silent, or worse, prideful. And now that decision haunts them. Because if they could undo one thing, just one, it would be that moment. That split second when they chose their ego over your heart. They think about what they could have said, what they should have said, the apology that never made it past their lips, the vulnerability they buried instead of letting it save the relationship. They remember the little things, the way your voice trembled, the way you didn't argue anymore, the way you finally stopped defending yourself. That's when it clicked, you were done. Not angry, not emotional, just done. And there's something devastating about that kind of goodbye. It's not loud. It doesn't break glass or scream through the walls. It just ends. And now they play that ending in their head like it's the final scene of a movie they wish had a different script. They walk through their days pretending, smiling when they have to, laughing on cue, but inside, there's a loop. The mental rerun of what they lost. They go over it in detail, what led up to it, how it unraveled, how they could have caught it before it collapsed. They remember the signs, the ones they ignored, the tears you wiped away when they weren't looking, the moments you sat in silence hoping they just noticed something was off, but they didn't. Or maybe they did and chose to look away. And that choice, that's the part they wish they could rewrite more than anything else. People always think the one who walks away is the one who suffers most. But sometimes it's the one who stayed silent, the one who thought they had time, the one who assumed they could always fix it later. But now later doesn't exist. All they have is the memory of your final goodbye and the haunting realization that they pushed away someone who only wanted to stay. They watch you from a distance now, maybe on social media, maybe through mutual friends, and wonder what could have been if they had just chosen differently, if they had just paused, humbled themselves, and chosen you instead of their pride. There's a moment in the mind right before sleep where all the noise of the day settles. That's when it hits hardest. That's when the memory shows up uninvited. It doesn't come with warning. It just drops in your face, your voice, your absence, and it stings. It stings in a way they can't describe to anyone. Because how do you explain missing someone you let go? How do you confess that the moment you lost them was the moment you lost a part of yourself too? They'll never say it, but it's there. It lives behind their eyes and in their quiet pauses. It could be sitting in a crowd, laughing with friends, and still, there it is. That moment, that split second when you turned away for the last time. It plays like a flash, but hits like a thunderstorm. And while they pretend they're fine, their soul knows better. Regret doesn't need words to exist. It thrives in the spaces where apologies were never given, where love was never fought for. And that's the pain they carry. Not that you left, but that they gave you every reason to. Sometimes they wonder what would happen if they reached out, if they finally said what they should have said back then. But every time they grab their phone, fear stops them. Fear that it's too late, that you've healed, that you've outgrown the version of them that hurt you. And that terrifies them more than losing you ever did. Because now you're not just gone, you're unreachable. And there's no undoing that. So they settle for the memory, for the replay, for the constant gnawing loop of what if. They walk through familiar places and remember you beside them. They hear songs that used to be your songs, smell something that reminds them of your perfume or cologne, and boom, it's there again. The moment, that one single moment when they lost everything, and didn't realize it until long after you were gone. They try to block it out, but memories don't need permission. They just come. And this one comes often, wrapped in guilt and laced with the sharp edges of everything they didn't do. They probably told people a different version of the story, one where they didn't mess up, one where they weren't the reason it ended. But that's just the surface. That's what they say to protect their ego. Underneath, in the quiet corners of their mind, they know the truth. And that truth gnaws at them, especially in those still, lonely moments when there's no one left to perform for. They sit with the full weight of their choices, and it crushes them. Quietly, constantly. And yet they'll never say it. They'll never look you in the eye and admit how many times they've rewound that moment in their mind, hoping somehow it could be different. They'll keep it buried, locked behind bravado and false peace. But the pain is real. The regret is real. And the memory, that moment they lost you, it lives in them like a scar they can't touch but can't stop feeling. Over and over and over again. They thought you'd fall apart without them, that your world would crumble the moment they walked out. But something happened they didn't expect. You didn't break. You bloomed. You didn't drown. You rose. And now as they sit in the same pain they tried to project onto you, they watch you from afar with a burning sense of envy. Not because you're pretending to be okay, but because you actually are. While they're still trapped in the guilt of what they did, you've turned your scars into strength. And no matter how hard they try to convince themselves otherwise, they see it, they feel it, and it eats away at them more than they'll ever admit. You see, they didn't just hurt you. They damaged something inside themselves too, but the difference is you chose to heal. You chose to sit with the pain, to cry it out, to understand it, and then to let it go. They didn't. They ran from it, buried it beneath denial, distractions, and temporary people. And now, while you've evolved into someone stronger, wiser, and more whole, they're stuck replaying the same mistakes, nursing the same wounds, caught in the same cycle. They envy your strength because it exposes their weakness. Your growth reminds them of everything they failed to become. It's not that they don't want to move on, it's that they don't know how. Healing requires honesty, and that's something they've never been good at. They'd rather paint over their pain with smiles than confront the truth head on. But when they see you standing tall, speaking with confidence, smiling with sincerity, they can't help but feel the sting of comparison. You've made peace with what happened. You've learned the lessons, released the bitterness, and built something better out of your broken pieces. And to them, that kind of resilience looks like a superpower. They thought you'd be shattered, but you became solid. They thought you'd shrink, but you soared. They don't say it, but they watch you. Maybe not directly, maybe not in obvious ways, but they keep tabs. They hear about you through others. They scroll through your pictures when no one's looking. They linger on your posts a little too long. And what they see, what they feel, is something they can't escape. Admiration laced with regret. Because every glimpse of your strength reminds them that they had a front row seat to your heart and still managed to mishandle it. And now, they envy what they couldn't nurture. You didn't just survive, you flourished. And in contrast, they've stayed stuck in the ruins of their own doing. There's something unsettling about watching someone you hurt become stronger without you. It forces you to confront what could have been. They know the version of you that was forgiving, soft, and endlessly giving. But now you've set boundaries. You've reclaimed your worth. You no longer tolerate what you used to excuse. And to someone who once held the power to break you, that transformation feels threatening. Not in a malicious way, but in a mirror kind of way. Because your growth reflects their stagnation. Your evolution highlights their immaturity. You rose, and they didn't. They tried to convince themselves you were overreacting, that the pain wasn't that deep, that you were too emotional. But when someone truly heals, there's a piece that can't be faked. And when they see that piece in you now, they realize how wrong they were. They envy the calm in your voice, the clarity in your eyes, the confidence in your walk, because they're still restless, still unsure, still pretending while you found your footing. They're still slipping on the same mistakes, still looking for shortcuts through the mess they make. They envy the way you turned your heartbreak into wisdom, how you've become selective with your time, intentional with your energy, and protective of your peace. They remember the version of you that bent over backwards, that stayed silent to keep harmony, that gave more than you received. And seeing who you are now, a person who won't settle, who no longer begs for bare minimum love, makes them realize just how much they underestimated you. That envy comes from knowing they once had access to a version of you they can never reach again. There's a hidden pain in watching someone become everything you needed after you lost them. They see the strength in you and wish they had supported it instead of silencing it. They envy your emotional maturity, the way you process, the way you handle conflict with grace instead of rage, the way you learn to be alone without being lonely. They still need noise, distractions, validation from others, but you built peace in solitude. You discovered who you were beyond the pain, and that kind of inner strength is something they've never had the discipline to develop. They tried to distract themselves, dated other people, went out more, buried themselves in work or shallow conversations, but nothing stuck. Nothing quieted the ache of watching you become untouchable. You see, people like them think healing is about forgetting, but you taught yourself that healing is about remembering without the pain. And now you walk through the world lighter, unburdened. They, on the other hand, carry the weight of unhealed wounds and unresolved choices. And every step you take forward is a reminder of how far behind they've stayed. Sometimes they even convince themselves they're better off. They'll tell themselves you were too much, too intense, too serious. But every time they see someone who doesn't understand them the way you did, someone who doesn't hold space for their flaws like you once did, that lie starts to unravel. And in its place is envy, not just of your strength, but of the life you built through that strength. You took your pain and planted it, and now it's grown into peace, purpose, and self-respect. Meanwhile, they're still walking in circles, haunted by a version of themselves they never grew out of. There's a reason they stay silent, a reason they don't reach out even when they want to, because deep down they know you've outgrown the place where their apology would matter. You've risen too far above their emotional ceiling. And it's hard to admit that. It's hard to accept that the person they once dismissed now stands on ground they're not strong enough to reach. They envy you not because you're perfect, but because you chose to do the hard, honest work they ran from. You faced the mirror. They turned away. And now they can't help but look at your reflection and wonder what it's like to finally be free. They sit with people who don't challenge them, stay in patterns that don't change them, and tell stories that don't heal them. Meanwhile, you've built boundaries like armor, spoken truths like fire, and carried yourself like someone who knows their worth. That's what real strength is, not loud, not aggressive, but steady, rooted, whole. And they envy it because it exposes everything in them that's still scattered, still hiding, still afraid. You moved on. You moved up. And they're still trying to convince themselves they don't miss what they couldn't handle. Their envy isn't about wanting to be you. It's about wishing they had your courage. The courage to break the cycle, to forgive but not forget, to walk away from what once felt familiar and step into the unknown. They had the same opportunity, but they chose comfort over growth, chose denial over truth. And now, as they watch you rise, all they can do is wonder who you might have become with them had they matched your strength, but they didn't. And now that strength they once overlooked is the very thing that leaves them speechless, envious, and far behind. There's a fear that lives deep in their chest, one they'll never voice out loud, but it's there. It lingers in the quiet moments, in the pause between thoughts, in the stillness after the distractions fade. It's the fear that you've moved on, that someone else has taken their place, that someone else now gets to see the side of you they took for granted. And worse, that this new person sees your value from day one instead of realizing it after it's too late. That fear doesn't shout. It whispers in the dark. It shows up when they least expect it, when their mind drifts and their guard is down. And every time they feel it, it tightens something in their chest, a quiet, haunting reminder that they lost something irreplaceable. They imagine you laughing with someone else, smiling in ways you used to smile with them. They picture someone else holding your hand, listening to your dreams, being there on the days they weren't. That image, it shakes them. Not just because you're with someone else, but because this new someone might treat you better, might actually show up, might listen without judgment, might love you without confusion. And that thought drives them crazy because deep down, they know they didn't give you what you deserve. And now the idea that someone else is, it haunts them in ways they can't express. They wonder if you talk about them, if this new person knows your past, if they ask about the one who let you down. And the idea that you might have said he couldn't love me right, or she didn't see my worth, bruises something inside them because your story no longer includes them. And that's what they can't stomach. They used to be the center of your world, your first call, your safe space. But now they're a chapter in your book that you've closed for good. And every time they imagine you being loved the way they couldn't love you, that fear grows. Quiet, constant, crushing. They scroll through your photos searching for clues. Is that smile for someone else now? Is that caption about a new beginning? They analyze every word, every pose, every background, hoping not to see a new face, but dreading the day they do. Because once they see that new someone standing beside you, all their denial will collapse. The illusion that maybe you're still hurting, still hoping, still waiting, it will die. And they'll be left facing the one truth they never prepared for, that you moved on without needing them to say sorry, without needing them to fix it. They'll never admit how much they check, how often they look, how many times they type your name into that search bar, hoping for reassurance and bracing for pain. But they do, because that fear that you found better doesn't fade with time. If anything, it intensifies, because they know what you brought to the table: the patience, the understanding, the softness, the strength. And now someone else gets to experience it, only this time that love is guarded by lessons they taught you the hard way. They're haunted by the possibility that this new version of you is more powerful, more healed, and more discerning, and it's all because of them. It isn't just jealousy, it's something deeper, something sadder. Because while they were busy playing games, you were quietly evolving. While they were distracted, you were detaching. While they were ignoring your needs, you were learning how to meet them on your own. And now someone else is reaping the rewards of a love they helped shape, but were never strong enough to keep. That realization, that's what haunts them at night. The knowledge that their immaturity became your turning point, that their carelessness became your clarity. And now someone better stands where they once did and does what they never could. They try to convince themselves that no one else will understand you the way they did, that your laughter, your quirks, your depth, those things were only for them. But the truth is, they never really understood you. They saw your light, but were too afraid to stand in it. And now someone else has stepped into that light, not blinded by it, but in awe of it. That's what they fear. Not just that you've moved on, but that you're happier without them. That you're loved in a way that doesn't leave you confused, crying, or questioning your worth. And that fear, it burrows deep. They replay moments in their mind, not just the ones they shared with you, but the ones they missed. The texts they ignored, the calls they didn't return, the times they dismissed your emotions as too much. And now they wonder, did this new person answer those texts? Did they show up when they were supposed to? Did they say the right thing at the right time? Every comparison cuts a little deeper because they realize the only person stopping them from being what you needed was them. And someone else stepped into that space effortlessly. They tell people they're fine, that they're over it, that you both went your separate ways. But when they're alone, that voice returns. What if she found someone better? What if he treats her the way I didn't? What if I was the problem all along? That's the fear they carry. A fear with no closure. A fear that stays silent around others, but screams when the lights go out. They wonder if your new someone knows how lucky they are, if they cherish you, if they see the value they only recognized too late. And the truth, that's what breaks them. They fear you've moved on, not just because you left, but because they stayed the same. You grew, you healed, you stopped waiting, but they stayed stuck in old habits, old fears, old patterns. And now the distance between who you were and who you are feels like a mountain they'll never be able to climb. They envy the person who gets to love the upgraded version of you, the one who learned to love without losing herself, the one who sets boundaries, the one who no longer needs to beg for attention. That new you, they don't know how to reach her. And that scares them more than anything. When you let go of the trying to reach your audience, you're scared they don't know how to reach you. And that scares them more than anything. It's funny, sometimes they dream about you, about what could have been, not the toxic parts, not the drama, but the peace that could have existed if they'd just chosen differently. In their minds, they imagine being the one who grew with you, not the one who lost you. But reality is colder than fantasy, because now you're smiling with someone else, loving without hesitation, living without wounds that they once caused. And no matter how hard they try to bury that truth, it rises every time your name is mentioned, every time your face flashes across the screen, every time a new post reminds them that they are no longer part of your world. That fear, that haunting, isn't just about losing love, it's about losing you. The you that stayed up late to understand them, the you that defended them when no one else did, the you that believed in their potential more than they believed in themselves. They know they can't get that back, not now, not ever. And so they live with that ghost, that memory, that shadow of what was, and the unshakable fear of what is, that you're in better hands now, that your heart is finally safe, and they will never again be the reason it beats. There's a silence they sit in now, one that feels heavier than the words they never said, because deep down, they miss something they'll never admit. They miss the way you made them feel. You didn't just love them, you saw them. Not the version they showed the world, not the act they performed for others. You saw the truth, the broken parts, the fears, the softness behind the armor, and instead of running from it, you held it. You made them feel safe when they didn't know how to be soft, understood when they couldn't explain themselves, seen in a way that made them feel real, even when they felt invisible everywhere else. And now that you're gone, that feeling is gone too. But pride is a wall they built so high they can't even whisper through it. They walk around with this emptiness they don't talk about. They try to fill it with noise, people, plans, distractions. But none of it touches the place you used to reach, because no one has made them feel the way you did. No one listens the way you listened. No one sees the details you saw, the moods you understood, the unspoken emotions you picked up on like radar. You knew them. Not just the surface, not just their favorite songs or the food they ordered twice a week. You knew their fears, their wounds. You made them feel like they didn't have to be perfect to be loved. And that's rare. That's sacred. But now that it's gone, they realize just how much they lost, how much they miss what they can't get back. But they'll never say it. They'll never admit they feel empty now, that they feel less whole in your absence, because admitting that would require vulnerability, and vulnerability demands humility. It demands a level of truth they're still too proud to face. So instead, they act unbothered, act like they're fine, like your love didn't matter, like being seen so deeply didn't mean everything, but it did, and they know it. They feel it every time someone misunderstands them, every time they try to connect with someone new, but it falls flat. You were the one place they could rest, the one place they didn't have to explain themselves, and now that place is gone. Sometimes they remember the little things, the way you would read their mood before they even said a word, the way you gave them space when they needed it, but never let them feel alone, the way you held their hand, not just physically, but emotionally. You held it all, their chaos, their confusion, their darkness. And you did it with patience, with warmth, with eyes that said, I get it, and I'm not going anywhere, but they pushed you away. Maybe slowly, maybe with silence, maybe with cruelty, but they pushed. And now that presence, the one that made them feel like they finally belonged, has disappeared. They go out now, they laugh, they post pictures, but nothing fills that void, because you weren't just a person. You were peace. You were the feeling of exhaling, of being understood without needing to explain. And pride won't let them admit it, but they're starving for that feeling again. They miss the safety of being known, of being accepted, flaws and all. And while they pretend they're okay, they're haunted by the truth that no one since you has come close, not in depth, not in presence, not in love. They remember the arguments too, the moments when you called them out. But even in conflict, you never made them feel small. You challenged them, yes, but from a place of love, from a place that wanted to see them rise. And that's the part that lingers most. You didn't just comfort their wounds. You wanted them to grow. You wanted them to be better. And they missed that, even if they didn't show it at the time. They missed being cared for in a way that demanded their evolution, because everyone else either expects too little or leaves too soon. But you stayed until they gave you no choice but to leave. Their pride tells them to stay silent, to never reach out, to never say, I missed the way you loved me. Because saying that would mean admitting they needed you, that they were dependent on the way you made them feel human. And pride hates need. Pride tells them needing someone makes them weak, but the soul knows better. The soul remembers who softened it, who brought light into the hidden rooms, who didn't flinch at the mess. That was you. And though they act indifferent, they are anything but. They miss the conversations, the ones where you said, tell me what's really going on. Not because you were nosy, but because you genuinely cared. You wanted to understand. And when they opened up, you didn't judge. You didn't rush them. You listened. That's what they missed the most, the listening. The way you made them feel heard in a world that constantly interrupts. The way you leaned in, remembered the details, and showed up in ways they didn't even know they need. That kind of emotional safety, that didn't come around twice. They miss your encouragement. The way you believed in them, even when they didn't believe in themselves. The way you reminded them of their strength when they felt weak. You spoke life into them. You reminded them that they mattered. And now, without your voice in their ear, the world feels a little colder, a little heavier. But instead of admitting they missed that warmth, they fake strength. They act like they never needed your support. But when the world gets quiet, when it's just them and their thoughts, they feel the emptiness, your absence, left behind. They might even try to replace you, try to find someone who gives them a similar feeling. But no matter how many people they meet, no one feels like you. No one makes them feel both safe and challenged, both comforted and called higher. And with every failed connection, that pride starts to crack, just a little, but enough to let the truth seep in. They miss you. Not just what you did for them, but how you made them feel about themselves. You made them feel seen, and now they feel invisible again. There are times they pick up their phone and type your name, but they never hit send, because pride steps in like a gatekeeper, reminding them of their ego, telling them to stay silent, to pretend. And so they do. They put the phone down, tell themselves you've moved on, that you don't care. But a part of them still waits, hoping maybe you'll reach out instead, that maybe you miss them too. But deep down, they know they don't deserve that kind of grace again, because they were seen, they were loved, and they let it slip away, all in the name of pride. They don't say your name often, but you come up more than you'll ever know. Not in obvious ways, not with full confessions or clear memories, but in fragments, in passing comments, in veiled stories that always seem to circle back to you without saying who it's really about, because speaking your name feels too raw, too close to the pain they're still pretending doesn't exist, so they talk around you. They bring up the places you used to go, the songs you used to love, the opinions you used to share. But they always stop just short of saying it was you, because if they said it, really said it, the silence you left behind would grow too loud for them to ignore. They'll be in a conversation with friends, casually talking about their past, and your silhouette slips in. They might say, Someone once told me, or there was this person who always said, and no one in the room knows that it's you, but it is. Every time. You're the ghost they speak of without acknowledgement. The echo that keeps bouncing back no matter how many times they try to change the subject. Because you weren't just someone they dated or knew. You became a part of them. And now that you're gone, that part remains unspoken, but not forgotten. They think by keeping your name out of the conversation, they can avoid the weight of your absence. But it doesn't work like that. The silence you left behind speaks louder than any name ever could. It lingers in their pauses. It hides in the tone of their voice when they reminisce. It reveals itself in the stories they avoid telling fully. Because you were the story they never finished. The connection that ended not with closure, but with a wound. And now every time they try to talk about life, you surface like a ripple in still water. Gentle, subtle, but always present. They'll mention a movie and pause because they remember how much you loved it. They'll taste a meal and for a second the memory of your laughter at that restaurant creeps in. They try to push it down, act like it's just nostalgia, but it's not. It's grief. A quiet kind, the kind that shows up when you lose someone who meant more than you could admit. And instead of facing that grief, they mask it with half stories, change details, and people who never made them feel the way you did. But even in that, you're still there in the lines, in the corners of their words. Their friends may never know the full truth because they talk in riddles now. I used to know someone who said that. There was a person in my life who made me feel, and no one questions it. But if they looked closely, if they listened a little deeper, they'd hear your name hidden in every sentence. They'd hear the longing, the regret, the ache of someone who knows they lost something sacred, but doesn't have the courage to say so. They don't know how to handle the stillness you left, so they try to fill it with borrowed voices and vague memories, but the silence always returns. Sometimes they'll laugh too hard at a joke that reminds them of you just to cover the sting. Sometimes they'll get defensive when someone asks about their past because your name is the one they've buried under layers of shame. And yet they carry you like a secret, a silent story etched into the fabric of their heart. They might not miss everything, but they miss the way you felt, the way you made them feel seen, the way your presence filled the space without ever demanding it. And now, that emptiness follows them, even when the room is full. They try to talk to new people, build new bonds, but when the conversation starts to dig deeper, they flinch because no one else gets it like you did. No one else listens the way you used to. And so they withdraw, or they overshare depending on the day. They try to recreate what they had with you without having to face the truth that what they had with you was rare. So instead, they leave breadcrumbs in conversations. Hints of you. They talk about a lesson someone taught me or a mistake I made with someone, but they never say your name because saying it would mean admitting that you're still there, in their head, in their heart, in the air between them and every new connection. They'll hear a song and instead of changing it, they'll let it play, hoping no one notices how quiet they get. They'll pass by a place you used to go together and mention it offhandedly, acting like it doesn't hit them. But inside, it does. It always does. Because you weren't just a moment in their life, you were a turning point. And now, the silence of your absence has become its own presence, one they can't outrun, one they don't know how to acknowledge without cracking open. So they bury it under remember wins and half-true stories, hoping the ache fades if they never say your name again. But it doesn't. It never does. Because when someone like you walks out of their life, the silence doesn't leave. It grows roots. It settles in. It becomes part of the room, part of their rhythm. And even though they try to speak around it, avoid it, soften it with other people's names, your ghost still lingers. Your energy still colors the edges of every conversation. And while they may never say, I miss her, or I should have done better, their words do. Their pauses do. Their eyes, when they fall to the floor at the mention of certain things, say everything they can't. You became the standard they're afraid they'll never meet again. And instead of facing that, they perform. They talk about moving on and learning from the past, but all they really learned is how to avoid feeling the depth of their own regret. So they talk in riddles, in metaphors, in lines meant for you, masked as something else. But their soul knows the truth. Their soul knows who they're really talking about, because you were the one who made the silence feel full. The one who listened when their words didn't make sense. The one who saw through the act. Now that you're gone, they don't know how to handle the quiet, so they try to fill it with noise, with mentions of you disguised as lessons or jokes or old memories. But your name, the sound of it, the weight of it, it still chokes them. And until they face that silence, until they're honest about the space you once held, they'll keep talking about you. Indirectly, not because they don't care, but because caring means confronting. And confronting means feeling the full force of what they let go. Something they're still too afraid to do. They've become experts at the performance, smiling at the right moments, laughing when expected, nodding along in conversations as if everything's fine. From the outside, they look like they've moved on, like your absence didn't dent them. They show up to parties, make small talk, post pictures with friends and pretend they're living their best life. But it's all surface. Just a mask worn to protect the fragile truth underneath. Because behind the rehearsed expressions is a storm they keep tucked inside, a quiet regret that creeps in every time the world goes still. They wear the smiles for others, but when the lights go out and the crowd disappears, they're left with a silence that doesn't lie. And in that silence, your memory returns, not as a visitor, but as something that never left. They don't talk about it. Not really. They avoid the deeper conversations. Steer clear of the topics that might reveal too much. Because deep down, they know if they open up, the facade might crack. And they spent too long trying to convince the world and themselves that they're okay. So they carry it quietly. The regret of pushing away someone who genuinely cared. The realization that what they had with you wasn't just special, it was grounding. And now that it's gone, nothing else feels as steady. They try to recreate that feeling with new faces, new routines, but it's never the same. Because the connection they lost wasn't ordinary. It was once in a lifetime, and they know it. In public, they've become who people expect them to be. Confident, charming, unbothered. They make jokes. They keep things light. But in private, when no one's watching, the act falls apart. They lay in bed staring at the ceiling, rerunning moments they wish they could undo. The words they didn't say, the moments they didn't appreciate, the love they mishandled. And those regrets, they don't scream, they whisper constantly. Sometimes it's a flash of your face, a sentence you once said, a memory they didn't cherish enough. And in those moments, their chest tightens because they can't go back. They can't rewrite the story. And they know they're the reason for the ending. They try to fill their days with noise, music, podcasts, social media, anything that keeps them from sitting still with their thoughts. Because when it gets quiet, that's when the ache shows up. That's when the truth becomes too loud to ignore. That they lost someone who loved them deeply, and they have no one to blame but themselves. They remember how patient you were, how you showed up even when they pushed you away, how you loved them at their worst, hoping they'd rise to become their best. And instead of meeting you halfway, they chose ego, chose silence, chose distance. And now they're haunted by what they didn't choose, you. They may tell others they're over it. They may even believe it for a while, but healing can't exist where there's no honesty. And they haven't been honest, not with themselves, not with anyone. Because being honest would mean admitting they messed up something rare, that they let go of someone who saw their soul and still chose to stay. And that truth, it's heavier than any smile they put on. It sits in their gut like a stone, because they know what it felt like to be seen by you, to be understood in a way no one else has matched since. And that kind of connection doesn't just fade, it stays, whether they acknowledge it or not. Sometimes they scroll through old messages, photos, moments frozen in time. They don't do it often, but when they do, it hits hard. The way you laughed, the way you looked at them, the way you believed in them. They stare at those reminders and wonder how they let it slip through their fingers. And then they snap back into the present, put on their armor and go back out into the world pretending none of it matters. But it does. Every time someone says their name and yours in the same breath, their heart skips. Every time they see a glimpse of someone who resembles you in a crowd, they do a double take. Because you're still in them, whether they say it or not. People around them don't notice. They don't see the shift in their eyes when your name comes up. They don't hear the pause, the hesitation before they respond, because they've mastered the act. But acting doesn't mean healing. It just means hiding. And no matter how well they hide, the regret still lives inside them like a second heartbeat. They can be in a room full of people and still feel completely alone because the one person who truly understood them is no longer within reach. And that distance wasn't caused by time or fate. It was caused by choice, their choice. And that's what stings the most. Sometimes they replay the end over and over, hoping to find a version where they spoke up, where they stayed, where they held on tighter. But that version doesn't exist. They chose silence when they should have chosen effort. They chose pride when they should have chosen vulnerability. And now, even though they're surrounded by people, none of them compare to you. No one knows how to calm their chaos the way you did. No one knows how to see through their walls, because you didn't just love who they pretended to be, you loved who they truly were. And that kind of love is irreplaceable. They may have tried to replace you, dared at others, laugh with someone new, but there's always a moment where they look over and realize it's not the same, that no one listens like you, no one loves like you, no one feels like you. And in that moment, the regret cuts deep, because they know they could have had forever, but they chose temporary. They chose comfort. And now what they feel is a constant longing for something they once had but never truly appreciated. A longing they carry quietly behind every smile. They go through the motions now. Wake up, work, socialize, sleep. But joy doesn't hit the same. Laughter doesn't echo the way it used to when you were around. Even their victories feel a little hollow, because you're not there to share them, not there to cheer them on. And that absence, it changes things. It reminds them that some mistakes cost more than pride. They cost peace. And now, while they act like everything's fine, their spirit carries the weight of that loss. Not just of a person, but of a presence. A peace they'll never find again, because they lost it in the one person who gave it so effortlessly. Bruniti, they keep wearing the mask, keep smiling for the world, but when they're alone, when it's just them and the truth, they wrestle with guilt, with longing, with the realization that they let go of something real for reasons that no longer make sense. And maybe they'll never say it, maybe they'll never reach out, but the regret is real. It sits in the pit of their soul, whispering what they refuse to admit, that losing you was their deepest wound, and no amount of pretending will ever make it disappear. They don't follow you anymore, not publicly. Maybe they unfriended you, maybe they muted your posts, maybe they told themselves it was better that way, but late at night or during quiet breaks in their day, they check, they look, they search, they type your name into that little bar and scroll through the parts of your life they can still access. And they do it silently, carefully, like it's a secret they need to protect, not from you, from themselves. Because checking on you reminds them of everything they tried to forget, and yet they can't stop. There's a part of them that needs to know how you're doing, even if it hurts. Even if it confirms what they already fear, that you moved on and that you're doing just fine without them. They look for signs. Are you smiling in your photos? Are you surrounded by new people? Have you found someone who sees you the way they failed to? They try to read between the lines of your captions, the tilt of your smile, the light in your eyes. And when they see happiness, a part of them feels relief, because you deserve that. They know you gave more than you got. They know you stayed longer than you should have. So yes, part of them is happy for you. But the other part, the one they don't speak about, it aches. It wishes you weren't so okay. It wishes you still miss them the way they still secretly miss you. Because if you're happy now, if you've really healed and moved forward, It confirms their greatest regret, that they lost someone irreplaceable, that they became someone who had the chance to love you right and chose not to. And now seeing you shine without them cuts in a way they weren't prepared for. They expected you to break, to fall apart. Maybe they even told themselves you wouldn't last long without their presence. But the reality, you rose. Quietly, steadily, you rebuilt. And now, from behind their screen, they're forced to witness the glow of someone they once dimmed. Sometimes they tell themselves they're just curious, that it's harmless to check. But the truth is, they're still tethered, still emotionally attached to the idea of you, even if they'll never act on it. They might not want to get back together. They might not even know what they'd say if you were face to face. But that curiosity isn't casual. It's rooted in longing, in regret, in the unresolved feelings they carry like background noise through every part of their life. You became a part of their internal world. And checking on you is their quiet way of staying close to something they never truly let go of. They pay attention to who likes your posts, who comments, if there's a new face showing up too often. They tell themselves it's none of their business, but their stomach still drops at the thought that someone else has taken the place they once held. Because even though they lost you, even though they had the chance to keep you and didn't, there's a part of them that still clings to the memory, the what if, the possibility. And every photo, every word, every update from your life feels like a door closing a little more each time on a chapter they never properly finished. They might even bring you up in conversation without realizing it. Not by name, but in comparison. She used to do that too, they'll say. Or someone once taught me that. And the person they're speaking with might nod, unaware of the weight behind those words. But you're there, woven into their thoughts, their language, their view of love and loss. You're still the lens through which they see connection, even if they pretend otherwise. And that's why they check on you, not just to see how you are, but to revisit what they had and now live without. There's a complicated mixture in their chest when they see you doing well. On one hand, they're proud. They remember who you were when they last saw you. Hurt, quiet, tired. And seeing you full of life, smiling again, thriving, it confirms what they always knew deep down. You were never the weak one. You were never the problem. On the other hand, that same image stings, because now it's clear you never needed them to survive. And that truth sits heavy, because needing someone is one thing, but being needed is a whole different kind of power. And they no longer have that. They wonder if you ever check on them too, if you ever think about what was, if you ever miss them. They hope you do, because it would mean they mattered, that despite how things ended, they still hold space in your heart. But when they see how brightly you're living, that hope dims, because you seem complete now. Not just healing, but healed. Not just moving on, but move forward. And while they're stuck refreshing a page, you're writing new chapters. And that difference, it's something they feel more deeply than they'd ever confess. They've probably tried to mirror your growth in some way. Picked up new habits, changed their look, started saying things you used to say. But imitation isn't transformation. They're still living in your shadow, trying to prove they're okay, trying to show the world and themselves that losing you didn't destroy them. But the effort speaks louder than their denial. Because when someone is truly over it, they don't keep checking, don't keep measuring their life against yours. The fact that they still do, it tells you everything you need to know. They don't want you to know they still care, that they still watch from a distance. So they hide it. They swipe past your stories before anyone notices. They scroll through your pictures in private tabs. They ask mutual friends vague questions, trying not to sound too interested. But interest doesn't lie. And the more they try to convince themselves they're unbothered, the more their actions betray the truth. You still have a hold on them, not because you're trying to, but because you existed in their life with authenticity. You loved without games. And now, that kind of love haunts them in the best and worst ways. They think about reaching out sometimes, typing a message, hitting send, but they always stop short. Because what would they say? I miss you. I still think about you. I was wrong. That would require vulnerability, something they've always avoided. So instead, they settle for distance, for secret check-ins, for silent scrolling and quiet wishing. They'd rather watch your life unfold from the outside than risk being shut out completely. And that's the cost of pride. Wanting to be close, but refusing to take the steps to get there. So yes, they check on you in secret. They watch your strength, your joy, your progress. And part of them celebrates it because you deserve everything beautiful. But another part, the hidden part, aches. Because that beauty is no longer shared with them. Because they're now a stranger to your joy, a distant observer of a life they once touched. And no matter how many smiles they wear, no matter how busy they stay, they still find time to see what you're doing. Because part of them hopes you're well, and another part wishes you weren't, just enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, you still remember what it felt like when they were your everything. And maybe the saddest part of it all is this. They will keep checking on you for years to come, in secret, in silence, from the shadows of their own choices. Never realizing that the love they once had was the kind people pray for and rarely get twice. They'll scroll through your life, through your strength, through your joy, not because they hate you, but because deep down they still love you in a language their pride won't let them speak, and they'll carry that ache quietly, pretending they've moved on, while your peace becomes the loudest proof that you healed from what they couldn't admit they broke. So if you're listening to this right now, let this truth sink deep into your soul. You were not easy to forget. You were not replaceable. You were not the one who failed. They lost something real. You became something stronger. And while they wrestle with their silence, you walk in your freedom. That is the victory. That is the closure. Thank you for being here. God bless you for surviving what tried to silence you. Stay tuned for more powerful messages that speak to your soul, lift your spirit, and remind you just how strong you really are.